I'm not the church planter. I'm not planting a church. I'm not doing that. And then God started to make it really clear through the circumstances and other godly men speaking into my life, this is what God's calling you to do. And then I had a really good pastor that knew me very, very well that ultimately said to me, one day he called me as I was praying through this. He just calls me out of the blue, and I'm just asking God for answers. And he says, Jeff, I need to let you know, based upon everything I'm seeing and what's going on and what God is doing, that God's calling you to plant this church. And he said, and if you don't plant this church, I'm telling you, you're sinning against God.
Welcome to the Plain Speech Podcast. My name is Michael Clary. My guest today is Jeff Durbin, Pastor Jeff Durbin, who's probably the only guest I've ever had on the podcast with an IMDb profile. You'll have to look that up. He was a former Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, but that's not the subject of our podcast today. I want to talk to Jeff about his personal testimony and some of the ministry emphases that are important to him. But before we get to that, I want to let you know about the King's Domain Conference that is coming up this May. The theme of the conference is Future-Proof Christianity. And the conference goes from May 8 through 10 this year in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Pastor Durbin is one of our keynote speakers. So the conference aims to answer this question: what do Christians need to do now to prepare for the next 20 years? I invited Pastor Jeff to speak at this conference because he has done more real cultural engagement than just about anybody else I know in the Christian leadership. He does a street apologetics. He pushes for equal rights for preborn babies, and he has appeared in congressional hearings speaking to political representatives across the nation. So this conference is really important, and the speaker lineup is outstanding. And I would like to personally invite you to come to the conference this May. And I'm sneaking in a little bonus, a little Easter egg here, if you pick up on it. Use the promo code PSP for $10 off when you register. The price is already pretty cheap. $120 is about as low as we could get it. But you can get another $10 off if you use PSP promo code when you check out. And when you're there, you'll get to hear from other future-proof leaders like Tom Askell, C.R. Wiley, Joe Rigney, Michael Foster, David Schrock, and myself. There are 2 women's breakouts with Emily Foster, who is Michael Foster's wife, and Betsy Mendel, who is a member of my church. And there's also a singles mixer, and we'll host it on site. Great chance to meet somebody, make some friends in a very safe environment at our church. So, and the singles mixer is going to be a contra dance. I really don't know what that is, but I'm told it's great. So hopefully you'll come and enjoy that and have fun. All right. If you want to find out more about the conference and to register, go to futureproofchristianity.com and you can register there. Thanks. And now on to the interview. So Jeff, you shared a personal testimony on Facebook a few months ago that really moved and inspired me personally. You know, I tried to look it up few days ago. I went back through your feed and I was like, man, I can't find this thing. I wish I could find it, but I loved it. You told your story about your marriage, and using drugs and how you came to know Christ. So I just thought a great place to start would be just to hear your story, if you wouldn't mind sharing your testimony.
Sure. So, I mean, I don't like to talk about it a lot, and it's interesting too. And sharing my testimony over time, people have said like, "Oh, that was really such a blessing. I didn't know that." And you know, I was in that situation, or I have family in that situation, and it's been a blessing to people. So, as much as I've like not tried to talk about it a lot and make it a big thing, God has been able to use it in a lot of people's lives. And the reason I bring that up is I didn't think that there was anything particularly, crazy, amazing, I'm so special. I just thought I'm a sinner. Christ saved a sinner and brought me out of this mess that I was in. And, but God used that a lot in terms of the addiction ministry that we were doing when we really first started Apologia Church. So I guess, starting, younger, I was raised in a non-Christian home. My mom was sort of mildly spiritual, kind of woo-woo stuff when things were, difficult or challenging. She'd mention, this person named Jesus. And I remember when I was young, at one point my mom showed me the Charlton Heston 10 Commandments movie. And then one Easter we watched the King of Kings movie, and there was a Bible. I'm a military brat. We traveled around the world. I grew up in Holland and Japan and all over. And no matter where we were in the world, there was this Bible that sat on the stereo, and it always collected like an inch of dust. But I knew that supposedly that's God's book, and that was kind of the extent of it. My dad was really an atheist, a kind of a nasty atheist at times. Definitely not a believer, and so non-Christian home, not raised going to church and things like that. And so my whole life was dedicated to martial arts. So I've been doing martial arts since I was 4 years old. I started in judo in Holland, and ultimately we moved to Japan, and I did two martial arts systems there, and 6 days a week. It was really intense training, and got back to the United States of America, and by the grace of God, I ended up just providentially performing once at a tournament in front of one of the most famous martial arts coaches in the entire world. Every private student he had was literally the world champion at the time in their own division. So he was world renowned, and he ended up taking me on as a private student. And so I was a full-time competitor. I was a part of numerous national martial arts teams, went to the Junior Olympics, and just I don't even honestly, Michael, I don't know how I graduated high school, and I kind of say that people laugh. I genuinely mean it. I genuinely mean I don't know how I graduated high school, because really from ninth grade through 12th grade. I was competing before that. From ninth grade to 12th grade, and my competition was so frequent and intense and national that I was rarely at school. I was traveling every week to somewhere else in the country for a major national tournament with some different tournament division. And so my whole life was martial arts. I was a world champion, a national champion, an international champion. Everything was karate. And when I was 16, for work, I just taught. I taught karate. I was living in DC at the time, Maryland, DC, and so I would just travel to different karate schools that would ask me to teach for them for days or a week. And that's how I made my living as a teenager in the middle of doing competition. And so anyway, one night I got home late at night, and I distinctly remember this. I was, the house was quiet, everyone's in bed. It was probably 10:30 at night or something like that. And I remember I made spaghetti, and I'm sitting in front of the TV, and Billy Graham, flipping through the channels, and Billy Graham came on. And I stopped on it and I listened, and that was the first time that I heard the message of the gospel. And I did, I think, I don't know. This is my wife and I have a debate about this as to whether it was a genuine conversion or it wasn't. I tend to think it was not. She tends to think that it was. But first time I heard the gospel and the message of eternal life through faith in Jesus, and I made that profession of faith. I called the number on the screen. They sent me, the Gospel of John and some scripture memory cards and things like that. And I started going to church. And
This is in DC?
In DC, yeah. And so I started for the first time going to church, and there was like, it's tough for me to even know. I mean, only God knows, like, was it a genuine conversion? Because I can tell you that, like, everything in me changed. My whole perspective, like, I feels like I did have an intense love for God, and like a desire for his word, a hunger for his word. I mean, everybody around me knew that, like, Jeff's a believer. He's a Christian now. And but I had like one foot in like my relationship to Christ, my professed relationship to Christ, and then another foot in, like, if I wanted to do something, I was going to do it. And, talking about relationships with girls, whatever the case may be, like, I had one foot in the Christian life and then one foot, like, whatever I wanted to do. And it was challenging too, because at the time I'm young, and I'm, at the time, on a stage somewhere in the United States of America every weekend, performing and winning, world championships. And I was number one in the nation. And so that came with a lot of temptation. And anyway, so as time goes on, end up marrying my wife, Candy. And Candy and I have known each other since she was like just about maybe 12 and I was, 14 years old, 13 years old, and kind of grew up together. Her uncle's was my best friend and a competitor on a team with me. And so Candy and her sister used to come to tournaments all the time. And so I knew his family. I stayed at his house. And so I've known her since she was super young. And we got married as soon as she turned 18. And about our first year of marriage, a year into our marriage, I ended up having some friends come from Hollywood that I'd done a lot of work with, and went out one night to a club. And I bring all these details up to say that there was a part of me that was, of course, this professing Christian, and I was totally opposed to drugs. I always like thought people who did drugs were dirty, skeezy. I would never do something like that. But I didn't have any problem necessarily drinking. And so we went out with my friends that night and went to a club, and I got so drunk that essentially everything kind of is black. And then I kind of came to at a different club at like 2 a.m. and with all the same people. And I kind of come to with a pill in my hand. And it was ecstasy. And I'm in a group of people. Everyone's holding a pill in their hands. I got a pill in my hand. And then security starts to run over, and they got their flashlights because we're all standing in a huddle looking into our palms, and it's obvious we're doing something. And so I do remember at that moment thinking, okay, I can drop this on the ground right now and maybe get caught with it, or I can swallow it and make it disappear. And that, because I'm telling you, my mind was like, I won't do drugs like that. It's totally dirty, gross people. Like, I'm not that kind of person. But at that moment, I was like, I got to make this thing disappear. And so I put it in my mouth and I swallowed it. And about 30, 45 minutes later, ecstasy. And so that one weekend turned into same club next weekend, looking for someone selling it, getting it. And then the next weekend, then twice a week, then 3 times a week, then every day. And so it ended up being about a year of just serious depravity, where I was a newly married guy with a 1-year-old son, and ultimately through that year, another baby on the way, and my daughter. And but I was never home. I would disappear from my wife for even days at a time, using all the time. I somehow was able to hide that from her. Now, she knew I was doing something, but I was somehow able to hide that. And anyway, so at the end of that year, where things changed was, sorry, my wife's walking in right now. And hey, hi,
Yeah.
August.
Hey, Candy.
At the end of that year, goodness, so many things happened. I almost OD'd several times. I had an intense experience, basically ODing on ecstasy. And when you do, you are overheating. You'll overheat and die. And so ecstasy users know that the way you're going to die is, overheat, cook yourself from the inside, basically. So one night I was at this after party. It's probably like 4 a.m. or something like that. And I had taken like 6 pills, I think it is, that night, which is it's a crazy amount of ecstasy. And that's the way ecstasy works, is you only have so much serotonin in your brain. And, when you first take it, like that first pill I took, I was high on ecstasy until the next afternoon. And now I'm taking like 5, 6 pills a night with alcohol, and it's doing none of the same things, but it's just, that's what it takes to get to feeling anything. But you start taking 6 tabs of ecstasy and you're going to kill yourself. And so I did. And so it's an after party, and I kind of realize all at once, man, I am hot and my heart is out of control. And so I look down at my arms, and my arms are just blood red. And I realize, oh my goodness, it's like my heart, someone has their foot on the accelerator and it's not stopping. And so I realize I'm overdosing on this right now. I knew it.
Wow.
And everybody who does ecstasy knows you got to drink a lot of water. You got to keep yourself cool. If you're ODing on ecstasy, you're going to overheat. Your heart's going to give out. You're going to die. And it was happening, and there was no stopping it. And so I tried not to panic, and I ran over to the freezer, grabbed some bags of ice. I turned the air conditioning way down. Everyone in there's going, what's going on? I'm like, nothing. And so I run into the bedroom and close the door and lock it. And I go into the bathtub and I pour this cold bath. I dump the ice into it, and I jump in the bath, try to keep my body cooled down. And I put my pulse points under the water, and I'm burning up so bad. I'm soaked in sweat. I'm just pouring sweat while in this ice bath, and I melted the ice completely. And it's just the water's warm at this point, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. It's not stopping. And so I jump out of the bath, and I honestly felt like I was starting to fade at that point. Like I'm going out. So I sat on the bed, and I remember this moment. I just sat there and I said, I knew what was wrong with my life. I mean, I knew enough about the Bible, enough about the holiness of God, enough about God's justice, and what I was doing was so sinful and idolatrous. I knew what I was doing. And so I sat on the bed and I said to God, I said, God, I know that you have every right to kill me. And I know what I'm doing is so sinful against you. I know you have every right to kill me. I said, but please just don't kill me yet. Please just don't kill me yet. And so I'm praying this prayer like, God, just please be merciful and don't kill me yet. And I'm telling you, all at once, I'm in this intense physical experience that is going out of control. I feel like I'm starting to fade and just lose everything. And then all of a sudden, at once, like a switch, it just turned off. And I was completely sober. I mean, I'm telling you, I went from being in this fog and drug induced stupor, and I'm my body's losing itself, and then all of a sudden everything stopped, poop, and I just come out of it, and I'm not even high on ecstasy anymore. I'm sober. And I knew that was the mercy of God, the grace of God. And as I often tell that story, I I would love to be able to say, and that's where God saved me and my life transformed and I never used again. But the truth is I just didn't want to die. I wasn't repentant, and I was just begging God not to kill me. And so I'd like to say I stopped. I didn't. The next week I was back at it again. And then God crushed my life entirely. In one day, I woke up like 7 or 8 in the morning, and my car was being dragged away, repossessed. I had an eviction notice on my door. My water was shut off. My electric was shut off. My phone was shut off. And the guy I was working for at the time said to the entire staff, I'm not paying any of you, sue me. And so now I had no money, no electric, no water, no nothing. Eviction notice on my door, and no car, no phone. I'm literally in an apartment with my wife, my 1-year-old, and my newborn baby, and it's complete silence. No more music, no more sound, no more partying, no more nothing. And God crushed my life in one day. He like made me stay put. And I got to this place where I started finally thinking, what is wrong with me? And what do I not understand about Jesus and what's going on? And so I ended up reading through the Gospels there, sitting in my house. We finally were able to get the water and electric on, and all I have is a Bible. And so I'm reading the Bible, and I'm reading the Gospels, and I'm reading the calls of Jesus to come to him. And I started to question whether I ever really understood the gospel, because I'm reading Jesus call people to come to him to die and to rise again and to come to him as Lord. And I started wondering, did I ever understand that? Was that ever a part of my understanding and coming to Jesus, that I'm coming to die and I'm coming to him as Lord to take over my life? And so I went into my closet one night and got on my knees, and I would say if there was a point of true conversion in my life, that was most definitely it. And that's where I turned to Christ completely and said, I have nothing, and I take over my life, own my life, take my life, and save me from my sin. And so that's where my life started to transform. And when I talk about my experience, my testimony, it's like I don't think it was that special of a thing. I try to emphasize, the reason I try to emphasize that is that a lot of people try to treat drug addiction and addicts as this special community, and it just takes this really different, intense thing that nobody else has to deal with. Like, I just was discipled. Like I got Christian men around me that started speaking into my life, discipled me, kept me accountable. I didn't think my addiction, I was some special case for Jesus. It was just that I was involved in sin. I was rebelling against God. This is idolatry. And I'm saved. And now God's transforming me and, renewing me. And it was just discipleship within the church context. I didn't ever went to AA. I never went to Celebrate Recovery. I didn't see anything special about me. It was just, I'm a person who's been saved by Jesus, and now you need to be discipled.
Yeah.
And it was years later. I don't even think I didn't. I did not. Before I started working at the hospital, at the drug rehab facility, I never made an issue over my drug addiction. Like I never brought it up to people like, oh, here's my testimony. I came out of drugs and alcohol. It was literally like, yeah, like I'm a sinner and Jesus saved me. And that's kind of like it. Like, I didn't make a big deal about this special case of drug addiction or something. But the reason it became something that came up was many, many years later. I had a friend at church who was the CEO of one of the oldest hospitals here in Phoenix that does, around the clock, 24-hour care, drug rehab, detoxification, nurses, doctors, therapists, all that stuff. He's at church with me and he's like, hey, do you think you can come to the hospital tonight and take over chapel for us? And I was like, wait, what hospital? He's like, oh, you don't know what I do? I said, no. And he told me, and I said, well, what exactly is it? He's like, well, it's, 24-hour care. It's like a, drug rehab, and they have like detoxification, medical doctors, and, full-time staff, and, inpatients. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, yes, we lost our chaplain for tonight. Can you come take over chapel? Because there's a Christian program where people can come in and do the Christian track of drug rehab. And I was like, oh, you mean there's a room full of people that I could talk to about Jesus and they can't leave? And yeah, I said, okay, I'm on it. And so what was interesting is, again, the whole drug addiction thing was never something in my mind that I was like highlighting. But that night when I got to the hospital and I got to that room, and this room was filled with people who were on detoxification medicine. Some of them just freshly got in that day. They're in bad shape. I start giving the gospel to them that night and realizing that I'm looking into my face, like with everybody in the room. And something happened that night where I had never really made this whole drug addiction thing like a big deal on my story, but I was able to communicate to everybody in that room based upon what had happened to me and what I knew I was doing. And I gave the gospel fresh that night in the context of where they're at, in a way that they could understand, because I was where they were at. And people came to Christ that night. And so the next day, my friend called me. He's like, hey, can you come again sometime? I was like, how often does this happen? He's like, dude, it's every day. It's every day. This is a hospital. And he's like, we lost our chaplain. Will you take over? And I was like, wow, I'd never even expected this. And so there's a lot of things that happened in the middle there, but I was pastoring a church in Phoenix at the time and full-time chaplain at this hospital for a couple of years. And that's ultimately where Apologia Church came from, is so many people came to Christ out of the drug addiction hospital that it became really, really clear that we needed to care for them full time, as they were these, fresh baby believers coming out of this lifestyle. They needed accountability, they needed discipleship. And so I resisted it for the longest time, Michael. I never, ever, and you could verify this with my wife and Pastor Luke, I never, ever, ever thought I'm going to plant a church and I'm going to be that church planter guy. I just wanted to be a pastor, serve with other pastors. And so when this started becoming clear, the Lord is calling us to plant Apologia, to do this, I resisted pretty defiantly for a good period of time, probably about a year, as I was like, nope, not going to happen. I'm not the church planter. I'm not planting a church. I'm not doing that. And then God started to make it really clear through the circumstances and other godly men speaking into my life, this is what God's calling you to do. And then I had a really good pastor that knew me very, very well that ultimately said to me one day, he called me as I was praying through this. He just calls me out of the blue, and I'm just asking God for answers. And he says, Jeff, I need to let you know, based upon everything I'm seeing and what's going on and what God is doing, that God's calling you to plant this church. And he said, and if you don't plant this church, I'm telling you, you're sinning against God. And so I was like, all right. So we put a bunch of Gideon's fleeces before the Lord. It was like, all right, Lord, if you're calling us to do this, fine, I'll do it. But you need to do this miracle, this miracle, this miracle. And he did it. And so that's where Apologia Church came from. Is at the beginning, everybody had come out of that hospital. Everybody. And we were known in Phoenix as that drug church. That's how pastors, oh, that's our drug church, because everybody there came out of drug addiction, and it was a rough looking crowd. It truly was. We had people, I'm not sure if you heard me say this before, but we had people who would hear our online ministry or see the sermons or hear the radio show, and they would be like, "Oh, that's good theology," or "I love that's my theology. I want to go to a church like that." And they would show up with their family, and they would attend service, and then after service they'd be like, "I love the teaching of this church, but we're not coming to this church. Like we can't." Like it's because it was a really rough looking crowd, and there were no children there, no families, all single people, all young, tatted up, gauges, smoking outside the front of the church, kind of thing. And it was a rough crowd. But now you have to hear me tell this story to even think that's where this church came from, because now so many of those people have grown in their relationship to Christ and even gotten married in the church and now have children, that now you come into church and people are like, is this Little House on the Prairie? Like, we've got women that are head covered, 10 children, and there's kids everywhere. And you would have to have us tell you this story, that this is where this church came from.
I have been in ministry for over 20 years. I've seen massive cultural changes in that time. The iPhone was only invented in 2007, but since then, technology has advanced at breakneck speed with seemingly little moral reflection on potential abuses. Gay marriage was invented by the Supreme Court in 2015. In its wake, woke ideologies and the LGBTQ movement have pressured Christians to conform or face cancellation. All the while, church attendance has declined, with many churches giving themselves over to the spirit of the age. COVID opened up people's eyes to government overreach, not to mention corruption in science and medicine. And we now know many prominent Christian leaders and institutions were complicit. Some prominent leaders of the 2000s and 2010s showed a lack of discernment when it was most needed, and they heaped scorn on fellow Christians who questioned the state-mandated orthodoxy. But recently, things have been changing. There's optimism in the air. God has given us a real opportunity for change that can turn our nation back from disaster. In other words, God has given us an inch. Let's take a mile. The emerging generation of Christians are more conservative. The fields are white for the harvest. The church has an opportunity to reach them for Christ and disciple them to be godly churchmen and responsible statesmen. Who should we trust for guidance in the next 20 years? There's nothing new under the sun. God has a way of rewarding faithfulness in men who are willing to pay a price for truth. In our day, a few men are aiming to follow their example. I want to learn from those leaders who got it right before, who saw what was happening, called it out, and paid a price for it. The men who sounded the alarm before have been vindicated. These are the men who can faithfully guide us into the next 20 years. These men understand the times. They can equip us for a future-proof Christianity. Join us. It is a powerful testimony, Jeff. And I mean, in one sense, I mean, what you say is absolutely right. I mean, there's all different kinds of sinners. Some people sin in ways that are more spectacular and obvious and clear. And some people sin in ways that are more, they're able to hide and conceal it. The Pharisees, the moralizing tendencies there. I think for me, I can at least speak for myself and why I appreciate the story. It's not like, oh, wow, Jeff is such a worse sinner than everybody else. Because I don't think that at all. It gives me hope for other people that I know that seem far away.
Yeah.
And I don't, maybe it's just me, but I don't see those stories as often as I want to. People that are far away from God, I want some hope that God will, can and will bring them back. And that there's nobody that's just beyond the reach of grace. And we need stories that, like what we want in our church. We tell people, it's like we want our kids to all have boring testimonies, to
Yes.
where they grow up in church, they hear about Jesus, there's never a time when they could think, well, I didn't believe. Um, and in that environment, if that environment is the ethos of your church, you can lose touch with the guys that just seem so hard to reach, so far away, and they you want to be able to see them. These are human beings that could be my son, my daughter, myself. That could be anybody I know, if the circumstances were different. And it's a powerful story to just remind us. It's like God is still in the business of saving people from all different circumstances.
Yeah.
And I love that. And it's a great reminder of the grace of God. And I'm thankful for it. Thankful for what God has done to save you, brother.
Yeah. Praise the Lord. Yeah.
So,
I don't.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I just certainly don't deserve it. That's all I can say. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
my past was a mess and awful and terrible, and I don't know why God even would bother to pick someone like me. That's when I think about.
Yeah.
I know we're all supposed to reflect on it like that, but truly, that's when I think about it. I don't think of it as any one particular sin. I think of just absolute mess
Yeah.
of, and I think that's how I always viewed it. And when I think about where this church came from, what God did, it was a surprise to me too. Let me just say that it was a surprise to me too, that particular part of my story was something that God ended up using the most to sort of get this ministry going and where it's at today. Because I never saw it coming. And it's funny too. When the hospital hired me on as the head chaplain, I remember the first 2 weeks, I'm kind of scattered, going, "What in the heck do I do? Like, what do I do? I'm serious." So I'm like, "Can you guys give me your resources? Like, what do you guys do here? You have a Christian track, so what do you do?" And like, "Oh yeah." So they're handing me like Celebrate Recovery stuff and AA stuff. And I remember sitting in my office that they gave me, and I'm just like reading through this stuff, and I'm like, "This is hot garbage." It's
Yeah.
totally not Christian, not gospel centered, and I'm like, I'm not teaching this stuff. So I remember I went to the head guy, and I was like, "Hey, Larry, so I'm the head of the Christian program, right?" He's like, "Yeah, man." I was like, "So I control the everything, the teaching, the materials." He said, "Yeah, it's your thing. You're the pastor. You control the Christian program." I said, "So I can do whatever I want for the Christian program." He's like, "Man, there's no one here supervising you for the Christian program. Like, you do your thing." And I was like, "Okay." So I didn't have it in my head. I had to develop and sit down and work through. All right, I've got someone that comes in here. They're here for 30 days. They're being detoxed. Sometimes the first few days are super rough for them. Like, they're just a zombie. But how do I take somebody who comes in, can hear the gospel, and then be discipled over 30 days? What do I need to do in relation to the addiction issue and all the other stuff? So I had to sit down and go to the drawing board and say, I'm not touching this AA stuff, and I'm not touching Celebrate Recovery is weak, not gospel centered, not what it ought to be for discipleship. And so I had to just sit down and develop what is a Christian discipleship thing for people that are in this context coming out of addiction. And so I had to think through things on the spot when they had already hired me to well, how am I going to do this? What do other Christians say? And it was a struggle. It was a struggle because there were not a lot of good resources. There were not just filled with all kinds of secular garbage. And, you even had Christian stuff. I'm reading through this stuff and I'm like, well, that's a loss. And I'm throwing it in the garbage, talking about the brain disease of addiction and all this stuff. And I'm just like, this is nothing that it's supposed to be for a Christian perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so all that to say, I never saw this coming. I didn't think it was a thing. And then I got thrown into it by surprise. And I had to sit there and go, all right, I guess I got to figure this thing out now. What is discipleship coming out of addiction? And I just kind of reflected on, well, what did God do to me? And how does scripture put the problem and then the solution? And so I did get in a lot of trouble, Michael. I did get in a lot of trouble, and I didn't try to, but I did get in a lot of trouble because what happened was this hospital, had, I guess in the 50s, from what I understand, the origin story of the hospital is in the 50s, there was like a Baptist pastor on Van Buren in Phoenix, which is actually not a good, it's a little better now, but it's not a good area. It's where all the drugs and prostitution is and everything. And Baptist pastor in the 50s supposedly was like going on those streets and just preaching the gospel to drunks and prostitutes. And they'd come to Christ, and he'd pull them off the street, and he needed a place to care for them. So he found like a small office and starts stuffing these, ex addicts into the building and to have a place to sleep. And he's caring for them. And that ended up being a ministry called Calvary Addiction Recovery Center. And then it became a hospital because it was so popular, and it totally transformed into a hospital that did a Christian program.
Hmm.
Then it was bought by a secular company of hospitals that owns like hundreds of hospitals across the country. But when they owned it, they had the secular program, hospital program, and they were like, we own a Christian drug program. So they were like, we have two tracks, secular and Christian. But when you look online right now for like a Christian recovery center, like rehab facility, it's few and far between. There are not a lot. And so when people were Googling Christian Recovery Center from across the country, like Calvary was the one that always popped up. So this place is just being filled with people who literally are coming there because family loves them, loves Jesus, and wants them to get a Christian program. So anyway, I'm there now as the head chaplain at a secular hospital who does the Christian program. And I can't tell you, Michael, how many times I got called into the principal's office. I mean, every week for sure, near the tail end, like every day. And I had like therapists and doctors working to like try to get me fired because they would literally sit down with their group and say, what did Pastor Jeff say in chapel last night? And people would say like, he would say like, we don't have the brain disease of addiction. Like, addiction is idolatry. And like, I don't have to identify with my addiction the rest of my life. I'm in Christ now. I have a new identity. And like, they didn't like that. It was a no. It's like, no, you have the brain disease of addiction, and you will always introduce yourself 30 years from now with totally dry without a drop of alcohol. Hi, my name's Bob, and I'm an alcoholic. It doesn't even matter what, like 30 years dry, you're still an alcoholic. You still have the brain disease of addiction. And so I would come in and say, all that's not true. You have a new identity in Christ. The old man is put away. You're raised up with Christ in the heavenly places. Like, you're loved by God. God sings over you. You are righteous in Christ. All of that. And so now I have people coming into they're coming into the mandatory like AA group in the morning, and you've got the regular people there going, "Hi, my name is Jerry, and I'm a coke addict." And then my person says, "Hi, my name is Cindy, and I'm righteous in Jesus Christ." And they'd be like, "No, no, no. But what is your addiction?" And then she'd be like, "Well, I've turned away from that. So, I'm loved by God." And like, and so I just would get in big trouble. So one day, I like near the tail end when I knew I was leaving, I got brought into the principal's office once, and they were like, did you say that Jesus is like the only way for people to know God? And I was like, yes. And they were like, "Hey, Pastor Jeff, we understand, but can you just be a little like easier and lighter on that? Cause like it's a very diverse program. We have people here that just don't believe in that." And I said, "Well, fire me." And they're like, "Well, we don't want to fire you," because they're making a lot of money on their Christian program. And they were like, "We don't want to fire you." And I was like, "Well, you hired a Christian pastor. I'm an Orthodox Christian minister of the gospel. You had hired me for a Christian program. I'm delivering a Christian program. Jesus is the only way to salvation. And so that's what I'm going to say. So if you don't like it, fire me." And they're like, "We're not going to fire you. We're not going to fire you. But can you just try to ease up a little bit?" And I was just like, no. So eventually, when God was calling us to actually plant, I resigned and didn't have to worry about being under the threat of being fired every day.
Yeah. Wow, man. The that I'm curious how you went from what you were just describing at this hospital to what at least a lot of the people that know you, at least where I'm from, they know you for street evangelism and doing apologetics and the 8-syllable word, I had to count it out in my head, presuppositionalism. So like where did that come from, where you're a guy just preaching the gospel to, addicts at a hospital to you're Mr. Presuppositional Apologetics guy.
Yeah. So it is very interesting to think like, you got this story or track in ministry where the Lord put me on with the addiction and the church plant and everything else. But that comes way later in my ministry and experience, because when if you go back in my life to when I was 16 and I first heard the gospel, I didn't know anything, Michael, about Jesus except the basics of what I heard Billy Graham say. And I knew that Bible was his book, and supposedly he died and rose again, so I know nothing. Like, I remember I was reading the Gospel of John over and over and over and over, and now I'm starting to go to church. And I remember vividly one day, very early on, I go to the pastor of this small Baptist church, and I'm like talking to him, and I'm all excited about the Bible and about Jesus. And I remember saying to him, yeah, so like Jesus is God, right? Like, 'cause that's what I'm reading. He's actually God, right? Like, I had to ask him, am I reading this right? He's God. And my pastor just smiles like, yes, he's God, of course. I was reading John over and over. And anyway, so I knew very little. And the first Christian book I read was, and this is funny how the providence of God this all worked out. I'm young, I know nothing. I'm in a Christian bookstore. I became like a fixture in this Christian bookstore. I would literally go after school, go to this Christian bookstore, sit on the ground and just look at these Christian books and just read them. And I remember this day that I was in the Bible section and I was trying to look for a Bible, and there was a little dispute that started to happen where these guys were trying to convince me of which Bible to buy. So one guy is there, probably trying to get me onto the NIV or something. Other guy is there, and he's KJV only, and they're having this little dispute. So I knew the guy at the counter at this point pretty well. He overhears the dispute, and he comes over and he like pulls me aside, and he's like, "Hey man, I heard what's going on. Like, read this book." And so he gives me a copy of the King James Only Controversy.
I've got that book on my shelf.
Yeah, my King's life.
Yeah.
So the first Christian book I read is the King James Only Controversy. And so I'm reading that. I'm all interested in like where the Bible comes from and all that stuff. And then that same guy at the Christian bookstore one day comes up to me, and I'm just so grateful for the providence of God here, because what if I wasn't there that day and he wasn't there? I would never even have gotten connected to this. But man, it's amazing. He hands me this cassette tape box, this long box, just filled with cassette tapes of Dr. Walter Martin with the Christian Research Institute. And it's Dr. Martin defending the Christian faith against the cults. And so he would teach on the cult, and then he invites the cult to come up afterwards and basically ask questions or debate them. And so it's just hours and hours and hours of content of Dr. Walter Martin teaching on the Trinity, debating Mormons, debating Jehovah's Witnesses, speaking on atheism. And dude, Michael, I just immersed myself. I mean, there wasn't a time where I wasn't, doing school or training where I wasn't listening to Dr. Walter Martin just over and over and over again. And so I fell in love with the defense of the Christian faith then. When I moved to Phoenix, I was still in high school, living on my own, actually. And shortly before I went to do Mortal Kombat, the live tour, I moved to Arizona. I'm living on this guy's floor with my wife's uncle, actually, Daniel, my good friend. And I was really into talking to Mormons. And so I see this big billboard up on the freeway, and it's like the Mormon Easter pageant, Mesa, Arizona. And I was like, oh, that's where the Mormons are going to be. So I went. I didn't know anybody. I had no friends here. And so I grabbed my backpack with my Bible and a bunch of Mormon materials, because I'd been studying at that point for a couple of years. And I go to the Mormon temple in Mesa. I get on the sidewalk, and I see this guy surrounded by Mormon missionaries, young Mormons, and they're all throwing questions at him from every angle. And he's just calmly in the middle, responding to each one, refuting them, going on to the next one. He's just surrounded. And it was insane. Like, he knew stuff about church history. Somebody would bring up something from Mormonism, he would quote their own materials. And it was insane. It was like, this guy's like an encyclopedia. And I was so impressed, and just, this is amazing. There's other people here that care about Mormons and are out here. So anyway, as the crowd sort of disperses and he leaves, Rich Pierce is there, from Alpha and Omega Ministries. I walk up to him, and this is 1996, and I said, "Hey, who was that guy?" And he said, that's James White. And I said, "James White, not James White from the King James Only controversy." He goes, "Yeah, that's him." I was like, "No way!" So it's so weird at Providential. I don't have it. Like the first book I read, now I'm seeing them, and so that kind of began a relationship where I got to see Dr. White over many years on the street doing evangelism. And I, of course, fell in love with all his debates. And I've just sort of, from that point on, like early on, it was a good relationship, but there was distance, and I would just sort of try to glean things and learn from him and watch him. But as time went on, the Lord allowed that relationship to grow and to blossom where, I call him today my spiritual father in the faith in many ways, a mentor to me. I see myself in many ways because of his teaching and his life's work as one of his disciples. So with that, he was such an inspiration to me. Dr. Walter Martin was such an inspiration to me. My big passion was getting out, doing evangelism, and defending the Christian faith. So from very early on, that's kind of what I felt. This is what God is calling me to do. This is where I feel most at peace, most comfortable. This is where I feel like the Lord just uses me. Sometimes the way that I've described it, and I'm sure you've experienced this many times, brother. Anybody who has a gift that this is truly from the Lord, there's times where you feel like you're like standing above yourself, like looking down at yourself, like that's not me. Like that's clearly not me. This is not coming from Jeff Durbin. That's where I had those experiences where like, man, I just had the most incredible spirit-filled experience on the street, reaching people for Christ. And that's really all I thought I would ever do is like, I never thought, my wife will confirm this too. I never was like, I'm going to be a pastor. I'm pursuing being a pastor. That wasn't I just thought I'm going to defend the Christian faith and do evangelism and, teach on this stuff. And so that's all I did. And my wife, one day, I'm trying to remember what year it was, maybe 2005, 2006, can't remember exactly. We're sitting there in the living room one night, and I was talking about how like, I'm just going to own my karate school, super successful, and just do evangelism. And I'll hand out bulletins at church or clean the church toilets. And I genuinely meant that. That's all I want to do. And I remember that she kind of really had this deep pause, and she was like, "I don't think so." I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "I think that you need to pray and ask God about what he really wants for you and what he's called you to do, because I don't think that's what God is going to ask you to do." And I was like, "Well, that's all I want to do. I'm just going to, I don't need to do anything in the church like special. I'll just hand out bulletins and I'll go do evangelism and apologetics, and we'll own our business and be super successful and just preach the gospel." And she's like, "You really need to pray, because I do not think that that's what God has for you. I think he has more for you." And I was like, "Well, that's what I'm going to do." It did take men in my life, pastors in my life, to come into my life to literally say to me, "We see this gift. This is clearly how God's using you. This is what you're supposed to be doing." And I was very resistant to it, and didn't feel like I really was worthy of that kind of thing. I just wanted to sort of be busy defending the faith and stuff. I didn't really feel like I was worthy of this kind of position or role. But here I am. But yeah, it really, when someone sees the evangelism, the outreach, if I had my way, if I was the boss, and I'm not, I would just do that every single day of my life. I would just get up, go drive around, and go preach the gospel, and get into conflict with people and not save people. If I had my way, that's what I would choose to do.
The world is changing so fast. Technology, culture, politics, ethics. As things change faster than ever, it's hard to keep up. Christians need to stand firm. But how can we stay grounded in the midst of so much change? How can we prepare ourselves, our children, and our churches for an uncertain future? It's not impossible. We can prepare ourselves, but not by chasing cultural trends, silly church gimmicks, or progressive theological fads. Rather, we prepare ourselves by being anchored in the unchanging truth of God's Word. We need a future-proof Christianity. The future belongs to Christians who live the old ways in a new world. Future-proof Christians are rugged. They don't whine like entitled brats. They are strong, resilient, and anti-fragile. Future-proof Christians are on the offense. They are builders and innovators and culture makers. They've got the guts to boldly assert the lordship of Jesus Christ over all of life. The future belongs to multi-generational families, godly men, women, children, and households. They labor to pass down a faithful legacy for their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Be part of a movement that's unshaken, unashamed, and ready to shape the world for God's glory. We've reclaimed the offensive. We've got the momentum. God's enemies are in retreat. The time is now. Join us. Praise God for that gift. I'll confess, it's like the people that have that sort of gift, there is a part of me that is tempted to envy it because I really admire the gift. And I have different gifts that other people don't have, but it is more rare to be able to just defend the faith very, like, just on the spur of the moment. I'm the kind of guy I need to prepare. It's like, all right, where are my notes? Let me pull out my notes, or I've got a note card on Mormonism or whatever. And it's, but just the way that it seems effortless, that is a gift of God. And praise the Lord for how he has raised up different people and equipped them differently in the body of Christ. And your ministry is a service to everyone that benefits from your ministry. I'm thankful for it.
I'm honored to be able to see how God's using it, because, the older I get and the more I grow in my relationship with God, the more I realize just how amazing God is and how little we are. And, when people will come up and they'll share stories of how they came out of Mormonism to Christ, or the Watchtower to Christ, or I was just sitting with an atheist yesterday that came to Christ watching our content. When I get to hear their stories, or people will say things like, your street evangelism with this group really blessed me, and my church is using this now to learn how to witness to this person or these cults. I feel like I'm sort of sitting on the outside of it, kind of looking in, going, they would say, how do you do this? Like, how do you stay so calm, or how do you do this? And dude, I'm telling you, it's like, if you knew me, the real me, like, in my flesh, the person I truly am, that the person you see there doing that evangelism, that's I feel like I'm watching, like, it go, because I know that genuine being controlled in that moment is genuine. It's from the Spirit of God, but, like, there's nothing special about me. It's not a me thing. That's a total Spirit of God thing. So I feel as much excited to see it all happen as everybody else does, because I know the kind of person I am in myself apart from Christ, and I know that's the Spirit of God. I know that's his work. And if people are coming to Jesus as a result of watching that, it's not because of anything special in me. It's just, it's something where you go, this is totally of God. Like, how do you do it? It's the Spirit's work. Like, it's all the Spirit of God.
The last few years, I've gotten to know a lot of really high profile Christians, at least high profile in our little corner of the Reformed Christian world. And what stands out to me is the ones that I think that are being mightily used by God in ways that I truly admire and respect. None of them think that highly of themselves. They all, it's interesting because a lot of these guys, I've admired them for years. I've gotten to know Joe Rigney, for example. I did an interview with him yesterday or the day before. I've admired his work for years. I've preached sermons and quoted different things he had written, and so to me, it's like this man is a titan. And I meet him at a conference, and I get to know him a little bit. We talk. I invite him to speak at a conference, and then I've run into him a few other places and interviewed him on my podcast. And I'm like, oh, he's just a normal guy. He's a really smart, normal guy, but he's just a normal guy. And so many other people are that way. Michael Foster and I've known him for 2 decades. I knew him, before anybody did. And as I've gotten to know him, I'm like, this man is consistently, as a man, I'm not impressive. And he a lot of these guys, they don't see themselves as impressive. And that's because we're not impressive. Um, like you're not impressive. I'm not impressive. God does things that through his spirit, it's his work. And it is a remarkable privilege to be the vessel that he uses. But you're a cracked pot. We're jars of clay. Like none of us are anything other than just weak humans that God uses for his own glory. And your narrative, I'm sure your martial arts training and getting punched in the face and punching other guys in the face, that has prepared you to go talk to Mormons, out in the street somewhere, or to sit in Congress or wherever to advocate for equal rights, equal protection, for preborn. Just your story, your narrative, and then you take that, the Spirit of God activates it, electrifies it, empowers it, and turns you loose. And then, as you say, it's not an out of body experience in a weird Eastern mystic kind of way, but
Right.
it is like God is speaking. And I've felt that when I'm preaching or whenever I'm doing music, sometimes it is like there is a deep pleasure of, and it's not this look at me kind of thing. There's a deep pleasure. I'm like, I am where I belong.
Yeah.
This is exactly where I'm supposed to be, and God is using me. And I know not everybody gets, ordinary plumbers don't get that experience. And it is a truly humbling privilege that, there have been moments in my life where I have that, and you have it too. And I mean, it really is a delight. And I love hearing just you say, it's like you don't see yourself as this, Ninja Turtle, larger than life guy.
No,
You're
no,
ordinary guy.
no. And neither is my family, which is nice.
That's
Yeah,
great. Yeah. Whenever you've
there's,
got, people that
my
know you
family,
really well that aren't impressed with you.
my family is the most unimpressed. um, yeah, it's that which is good, which is good. And I feel like that's probably the right way to put it, Michael. Is it's more of I've grown more and more to just be very thankful for what God is doing, because I'm so aware of the fact that it's not because of me or anything in me. It is truly a work of God. And so I've just grown to be thankful for those moments where I know this is truly the Spirit of God doing this. God is speaking, God is moving here. Or of hearing somebody's story, just being so thankful that God did that in their life. And it's interesting too, because when people will share these amazing stories of coming out of some horrible situation or coming out of some cult or something, I almost what's the right way to put this? I don't know. I've seen it in people's faces at times. Like, I think they're surprised at how much I want them to take me out of the story,
Hmm.
and just for them to reflect on, this is what God did in your life. Like, there's
Yeah.
nothing special about me. Like you just said, it was just a vessel. Like, I was just the means, the vessel by which God was reaching into your life to save you and do this. I'm just your brother. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just here in the same way you are. And it just happened to be that in the providence of God, I happen to be the vessel that God used to, to get you this message. But it was his work that changed your life. It was his work that opened your eyes. And I've just learned to be more and more grateful. Just also, I think, Michael, like, how hard faithful ministry can be. Sometimes it's horrible. It's like, why would any person choose this life? From a human perspective, there are moments where you're just like, this is extraordinarily challenging and difficult and painful. Like, why would somebody choose? Like from a human perspective, it's like it doesn't make any sense. Like,
What's
you're
the
not
painful part?
the painful part. You know how faithful ministry, either if you have to say things that need to be said, that where people are going to vilify you or attack you. You could be vilified in the media. You could have the New York Times coming out after you, or some media thing doing a hit piece on you. People lying about you, lying about just spreading false stories. Like, I just give you an example of like how obscene it can be in extreme. As like the other day, I saw somebody post on X. Somebody shared it with me. They were like, "Dude, check this out." It was someone like said something to the effect of like, Jeff Durbin and his elders and leadership knew about sexual abuse in his church, and with his elders and leadership, sexually abusing children, and they covered it up. And like, it was like, that's
Hmm.
crazy. Like that's
Yeah.
insane. Nothing like that, remotely like that, has ever happened ever, but someone shared it. And that's the kind of stuff, like, you'll see that and like, oh gosh, this is just awful. There's the lies and the things that are spread. And then also just faithful ministry is challenging. Like, the swings, Michael. You can go from like 9 a.m., this incredible story of God's faithfulness and just blessing in some family's life. Maybe he healed something between a married couple, or some miraculous thing happened. Someone comes to Christ or whatever, some great, great thing. And then at 10 o'clock, it's just tragedy,
Yeah.
conflict, horrible things. And the day will swing like that. You can have a day where it's just like blessing, horrible, blessing, horrible, blessing, horrible.
Yes.
And sometimes you have people's entire lives in your hands. Like, we had a situation, we've had so many, but like last year, someone had brought, accusations against somebody that were so serious that we have to respond, if true, like immediately, by making a police report and calling the
Wow.
police. But so, the whole day is dedicated to that, like investigating, figuring this out, what's true, what's not true. And you're holding people's whole families' lives in your hands, their
Yes.
futures. And then, thankfully, by the end of the day, through examining evidence and talking to witnesses, completely fictitious allegation and everything, and thank God we didn't call the police, kind of a thing. But
Yeah.
you think about things like that, you're like, we held this family's future, or at least in the short term, uh, very serious stuff in our hands as pastors. So it's a challenging thing, and the painful parts will be pretty consistent. It's not without extreme joy, but it's also with some serious valleys of
Yeah.
difficulty. So I've come to be so, so, so grateful, and I take it as, this is the Lord encouraging me to keep fighting. When
Yeah.
people will come up and they'll say, "Hey, I need you to know, like, I came to Christ out of this," or like, "You saved, I was going to kill myself, and then one of your messages came up, and God used it to save me and change my life," or, "I came to Christ and then ended up marrying this Christian girl, and now here are our children,"
Hmm.
or whatever. That'll happen regularly, where God will like send someone like to come talk to me and tell me the story, and I like to just sort of go, "Thank you, thank
Yes.
you, I needed that. Thank you so much."
Yeah. That those are some of the most gratifying moments in
Yeah.
ministry is whenever I get to see somebody will give me some testimony about how God has worked in their life,
Yeah.
and I got to have some part in it. A few years ago, in my church, there was a handful of people that had gathered together for a picture, and they put it in this book. There's like a book of memories that they gave to me as a gift. Um, but it was, I don't know, 25, 30 people, men, women, children. And the picture was, these are all the men and women that met at church and got married, and these are their children. Um, and I was just like, man, take me home now, Lord. I can die a happy man, because I got to have a part in their story, that the
Yeah.
church that God had led me to plant 15 years ago has led to these good things. And we do have, it's kind of like watching having a front row seat to a NASCAR race. It's like everything is whizzing by fast, and you're there for the thrill of the fast cars, but also for the crashes and the horrific things that can happen. And that's what that is the life of a pastor. And for me, I'm just like, there are days when I'm like, man, like my emotions have been all over the map,
Mhm.
but I wouldn't, there's no other place I'd want to be, no other way I'd want to live. It's like, this is the best thing. I want to be respectful of your time. I have 100 questions I want to ask you. Do you have time for two more quick questions?
Sure. Yeah.
Can you tell me how you balance all the different home life, church, activism, evangelism? You're everywhere. Um, how do you keep all that straight?
Babe, how do I do it?
She's like, you don't.
Walked in like right in, yeah, she said, living on a prayer every day. I well, I mean, I have answers, but like my son-in-law was asking me the other day. He was like, "Hey, so how are things going?" I said, "Great. God's blessing us. Things are, ch- chugging along." And he was like, what's it like right now?" And I said, "Well, like which thing?" And he was like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, which thing?" I said, "Because you have Apologia Church, all my full-time responsibility is there, and you have Apologia Studios and End Abortion Now, and a number of other things that I'm doing. Helping my father-in-law start a new business. They moved in with us from Kentucky to help with the girls, and which we're so grateful for. And then we've got, of course, now this Durbin 2.0 family that I've started with my newly adopted children, with my other ones grown and out of the house and having their own children now. So, like, which thing are you talking about? I don't know. Um, so I think the main thing is, how do I balance it? Well, I have a very committed wife and strong wife, good wife, who is also a lot more organized than I am. Um, and so she does a great job of managing the home and being an encouragement and always being available to sacrifice for the sake of the ministry. I've got a great group of men around me. I've got phenomenal elders next to me that I get to serve with. I've got passionately committed people in every position of ministry around me. So I think that that'd probably be one of the things I could say. Probably the most important thing is that God has definitely blessed me with the very best, most gifted people around me in ministry that I can trust, that are dependable, that don't take themselves very seriously either.
Hmm.
And just want they I can say for sure everybody around me that's serving has a pure heart towards ministry. Like the elders that serve alongside me, they are the most genuine, real, no pride, don't take themselves seriously, love the Lord, just want to sacrifice for Christ, don't care about the money, don't care about the fame. None of that stuff matters to these guys. Not Pastor James, Pastor Zach, Pastor Luke. They just love the Lord. And they are doing this out of a pure heart. Everybody that works at the studio or End Abortion Now, they just have a track record of showing their motives are pure, their intentions are pure, and they're willing to do whatever it takes. They mean it. They want to end abortion, and End Abortion Now, they want to end abortion. They mean it. They'll do whatever it takes. And so I'm surrounded by that every day of my life. I've got a great wife who does, just like I said, phenomenal job of caring for our family and always being willing to sacrifice where it's appropriate and meaningful to do so. She's always willing to. And then I'd say there, you brought up something. You brought up the martial arts. I've thought about this now more, I think, over the last 3, 4 years of my life than I had ever been aware of it before. I just never really put the pieces together. Um, just sort of the way that God built me and raised me is, even though I wasn't raised in the church, I was raised in a dojo. And 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 like I said, Michael, I never even made the connected the dots until fairly recently, and like go, oh my goodness, that is where I learned that, and that is why I can do that, and oh wow, that's why I'm made up this way. God saw fit to like give me this love for martial arts. So like at 4 years old, I was stuck in front of the television watching like kung fu theater, like in Bruce Lee movies, like just on repeat. From the very earliest memories I have are of like Bruce Lee,
Hmm.
watching like martial arts stuff. And so that was always my passion. And I was raised in dojos under martial arts instruction in really intense situations. Like, I mean, my youngest memories are like fighting, full contact, getting really hurt, getting knocked out in Japan as a kid, getting knocked out cold
Hmm.
because it was full contact. We didn't wear gear except a mouthpiece and a cup. And if you wanted to wear a cloth pad over your knuckles for your own protection, you could, but it was like kind of, shin guards, you can wear some soft cloths, but like that helped your opponent. So why do it? So, I mean, it was hardcore, seriously painful, difficult stuff. The training was, I mean, in some ways you'd say that's abuse, probably was abuse. Like parents weren't allowed in one of my karate schools in Japan, parents weren't allowed to actually view the training. They were not permitted to watch the training. And the doors were shut. Parents could not see inside. And there was a lot of bad things that happened in there in terms of like, the instructors beating the crap out of you and like making you feel it. And their philosophy was, hey, if you have to fight a grown man to defend your life, you need to know what it feels like when he hits you. So ready, bam, and like knock you down, and you just balled over crying your eyes out, and they didn't care. Like I remember once I got knocked out. I'm on the line and they called go. We got no gear on, and it's full contact to knock the person out of the ring or down or out. He throws a spinning hook kick, hits me in the temple. I'm out cold and just darkness. And I remember I woke up because my back felt like I was something hard against my back, and I could hear noise everywhere and just loud noise. Everything seemed like it was still going on. And so I couldn't figure out where I was or what was going on. And I realized I'm laying down, and I kind of like lean up and I look, and they had dragged my body to the other side of the dojo and just put me over by the window. So I got knocked out, and the instructors just took me and they put me over by the side of the dojo and just kept going with the classes. So all that to say, my whole life was like, it was put into me to fight, to be a fighter, and to win. And so like, especially my instructor that I got when I got to DC, his students were the world champions. So when he took me on, like he accepted no excuses, no, I tried. He expected me to win, and he's like, I'm training you with the right training, and you have the skills to win. So you will do this, you will train this hard, you will do this every day. If you don't, I won't teach you anymore. And you will do this, and you will perform at this level. And so I was at this like peak level of competition, and it was demanded of me, perform, do the right thing, win, don't give up, give it your best, don't accept second place. And so that was sort of built into me my whole life. And so when I see like the ministries that God has called me to oversee and to serve in, there's a part of me that's super competitive, that was sort of built into me. Like, don't do this just to do it. You do it to win. And it was funny. I do have a super competitive nature to myself because of all that. 2 weeks ago, we had a lot going on in service. We had to do baptisms and Lord's table and a bunch of other stuff. And the elders were like, Jeff, like, we have all this going on today and then some. And so like, you do need to preach a shorter message. And so I was like, I'm going to go 25 minutes. And they started laughing. I was like, why are you laughing? And they were like, sure, 25 minutes, we'll see. And then I took it like this is a challenge now. I took that as like, okay, then I want to win the trophy. And so I did it in exactly 25 minutes on the dot. They took it as like a cessationism is not true kind of a thing. So I'm going to say, like, in my personal makeup, I want to do spiritually what I do to the glory of God. Do all your work as unto the Lord. I know the proverb, and it means a lot to me. In all toil there is profit, but in mere talk there is poverty. And so my mindset and makeup is that this is what's expected of me. God's called me to this. Do it to the glory of God, and do it really, really well. Make sure that you're not just coasting. Do this to succeed with it. And that's just sort of my makeup. I like to do it. I enjoy hard work. And I feel like if I'm not working hard, I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Amen, brother.
Yeah.
Jeff Durbin, thank you so much for your time, man. It's really encouraging to talk to you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Plain Speech Podcast. You can see Jeff Durbin at the Future Proof Christianity Conference coming up this May 8 through 10 and in Cincinnati, Ohio. And you can go to futureproofchristianity.com to find out more information and to register. And that's it. See you next time.